We are going live. We are going live. We are going live. Setting up your Facebook Live. It's taking a second. We are going live. We are going live. Listen to me. Listen to me. Okay. All right. We're on Facebook. Welcome, everybody. We're going to look at crucifixion methodology in the Roman Empire. And looking toward, how was Jesus crucified and trying to understand that occasion better and discussing it. Let's see, how's the picture doing? How's the picture doing? Picture's doing okay.
Do you have the thing that Jean made for you? The crown?
Oh, it's downstairs. Would you bring it?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I got to get this sweater off. I'm hot. We abandoned the ship.
Yeah.
Where's my hat? Okay. This meeting is being live streamed. And we to talk about the crucifixion, I have a lot of images, pictures, diagrams, video. I have all kinds of cool stuff to share with you. And then I'll get through with it in less than 30 minutes, and we will discuss for hopefully more than 30 minutes. That's my plan. So let me go ahead and share this with you. I'm going to share the screen if it will let me, and it won't yet. Okay, there we go. And we are sharing the screen. And I'm going to click this. Why doesn't it have the thing about sound? Yeah, there it is. Share sound and optimize for video clip. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to share it. Here we go. I don't know where Patricia's is. She went to get Jean's crucifixion thing for me, and she didn't come back up. It's right on the table in my office. Don't know where it is. Okay. She's coming. All right, so the purpose here is completely utilitarian. I'm not going to be talking to you about my beliefs about the cross or faith in the cross or Christ and his cross. I'm not talking about Paul's theology specifically. I'm just trying to show you where and what we believe happened based on the scriptures and based on historical records of the Romans, and as well as inscriptions and other archaeological finds, which I'll point out. So if you'll look at that gold dome, I just want you to orient to that gold dome. Wow, that's nice. I don't know if you can see it, but there's Jean's thing. We'll look at it in a minute. Got Jean's cross here. All right, so if you look at the gold dome, that's where the temple once stood, almost certain. In archaeology, some things are certain. A lot of things are kind of in between, and some things are uncertain, but we've got some pretty good ideas here, what's going on archaeologically, as well as biblically and scripturally. And there is a gray dome directly above that gold dome in the background. That's where Jesus was buried and raised. That's the old city of Jerusalem. You're looking at it from the Mount of Olives. You're looking to the west. And that's the new city of Jerusalem on the hill. This is called the edicule. Edicule is just a fancy name for why isn't it working? There we go. It's just a dictionary name for a small memorial structure of some kind, sometimes over a tomb, as this one is, and it was made in the 18th century. The other one, the earlier one, burned. But that's in the rotunda of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jesus's tomb is underneath that thing. And the tomb that we're going to show them next week is a mock-up of the tomb next door to Jesus, which is in the Syrian chapel right behind, right there in that door. And it's sort of center left. There's a little door on the back wall between those arches and columns where there's a door. You go into the Syrian chapel. And I'm going to show you a mock-up, life-size mock-up of that next week. All right, and then that's looking up. That's the edicule at the bottom, Jesus' tomb. with the sun coming through the hole in the roof. Isn't that cool? It's really fantastic to see in person. You can't describe it with a picture. You can't feel the place. You have to feel the place. And it's a mixture of things. It's tense, dark, smoky, smelly, lots of incense and, So here's a video. It's 30 seconds long. 30 seconds long. I'm not going to comment on it yet. I just want you to take note of what you see. I'll play it a couple of times, maybe. And look at the pipe off the ground. Look at it wouldn't stop, so I'll move to the next slide. Okay, so this is all across the. I want to move this. How do I do it? Go down here, maybe. Okay. Well, it covers up something. Let me go up top. How about that? For now. Okay, so this is about Roman crucifixion. You can see the gold dome, that's where the temple stood, and then the silver dark dome behind it were the domes of the Chapel of the Cross and the larger dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre's rotunda, where Jesus' tomb is. Those two gray domes behind the gold dome. Again, taken from the Mount of Olives. This is the heel bone of Yehohanan, a crucified man that was discovered north of Jerusalem, just north of Jerusalem. I got more to say about that in a minute. Here's the old city from the air. Somebody did a little helicopter flyover here, and you can see the gold dome toward the center, but more a little to the right and down from center. You can see the gold dome on the temple platform, or what today is the Al-Haram Sharif, the noble sanctuary of the Muslims, the third holiest site in Islam, but it also is the holiest site in Judaism, and it's revered by Christians. The arrow is pointing to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the first and holiest site in Christianity, believed to be the site of Jesus' death and resurrection. Do I, after teaching over there for a while, for many years, think that that's the spot? Yes, I do. I'm convinced. We work with circumstantial evidence, archaeological evidence, historical evidence, and you do the best you can. But there are a lot of people who agree with me. By the way, the garden tomb is up at the top, on the other side of that street, beyond the Damascus Gate. And the garden tomb is not the authentic site, but it's beautiful. And I recommend you go there, even take the tour and just see what they say. I mean, you can disagree with people and still be nice to them, right? Right? Okay. So the temple is the rectangle, and in the middle of the rectangle is the temple itself. The rectangle is the court of the Gentiles. That's the temple platform from Jesus' day. This is first century. So the red walls were there in Jesus' day, okay? But that blue wall wasn't built until around 41 to 44 AD by King Herod Agrippa. So you don't want to have a cemetery or burials or tombs or corpses inside the holy city of Jerusalem. So when they built that blue wall, guess what they did? They tried to remove all the tombs and relocate all the ossuaries and stop burying people in that area inside the blue wall where Jesus died and was buried. But when they moved them, they missed one. The tomb next door to Jesus was stuck behind a wall, and they never saw it, and they built the church over it. But I love to teach there, and I'll show it to y'all when we go. So it is, let's see Golgotha as the blue square right in the middle, a little bit up from the middle, right? There's the church from above, and lower right, can you see the courtyard where the doors are? Lower right above that Christmas tree. Behind that Christmas tree, at the very bottom, is the courtyard. It's next to the bell tower, which has a red roof center. This is a courtyard with people in it. At the
Can you use
bottom,
your cursor?
there's people. The people are down here. Can you see my cursor? Yeah, you can see it. Good. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the door to the Holy Sepulchre, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is where Jesus was buried. They tell you he died up on top of the place of the skull, which is inside of here, but he was probably crucified on the roadside at the place of the skull, which would have been somewhere down here where these people are, outside of the main gate of the city, which would be in the lower right-hand corner. One of the main gates of the city on that side, on the west side. Okay, so did I cover everything? Yeah, so what you have to imagine is that Jesus was buried in a first century rich man's tomb. It's described very well. And first century rich people buried in exactly the same way for almost 2 centuries, first century AD and first century BC. And so Jesus was buried in a burial cave with a stone rolled in front of it. It was soft limestone. They couldn't use it anymore for buildings, so they just left it. They abandoned the quarry and left this big chunk sticking out of soft, unusable limestone. Well, Joseph of Arimathea contracted people, apparently, to make a burial tomb in which no one had been laid, a brand new tomb for his family right there. It was just a coincidence. And so Jesus, he laid him in there. And so it's nearby. It's almost dark. What are we going to do? We've got the body. They asked Pilate. Pilate gave them permission to take the body down, which they only did that in Jerusalem because of their sensibilities about corpses and holy days and Passover and all that. They didn't want corpses up on crosses on the holy day. So they wanted them off the cross before the Sabbath and the Passover began that evening. Okay, so they had to remove the ceiling of the cave. Imagine you stoop and go into the tomb, but the ceiling's gone. They removed all the rock from the top of the cave so they could get access to the tomb to build something on it. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that striped yellow down there in the lower left-hand corner, all of this is rock. And they took all that out to put the church down. But it wasn't just the church, and it wasn't the church that did it. By the way, this is the immovable ladder. It's still there. There's this ladder that just sits on that cornice right there. You can see the ladder is here and here where the arrows are pointing to it. And a photograph going back to 1885 is still there. But that cornice is what I wanted you to see, that the ladder is sitting on, that ledge. That's from the temple to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. They built that on the site to try to erase Christianity after the revolt, the second revolt, the Maccabean revolt.
Mm-hmm.
And and so they took the cornices and some of the decorative pieces from the temple of Aphrodite, apparently, and used it for decoration in the Crusader period when they built this church. They found it in the rubble. And they took the old crumbled temple of Aphrodite and used parts of it to create add these elaborate cornices to the church. I thought that was interesting. This is just to try to imagine over time the 4 stages. So here's the stage from the first century when Jesus was buried. Then they removed the hill and created the temple to Venus or Aphrodite, the goddess of love. That's 150 AD. And then Constantine, his mother came along, Helena, and she built the original Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre, which was destroyed, and I think by the Persians. And then down here at the bottom, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built by the Crusaders in the 12th century, the 1100s. So that's just sort of an excavation of the site in 4 simple steps. There was a tomb. Originally there was a quarry, then it was abandoned and they turned it into tombs in a garden. Then it was destroyed by the Romans and they built a temple to Venus or Aphrodite, then the first church, then the second church. That's the way it works. Now, this is the temple model at the museum, the Israel Museum, and the X marks the spot where Jesus would have likely been crucified, not way up on top of that precipitous hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull. It just was called that apparently because it looked like a skull, this soft outcropping, but it was too narrow and too small and too much trouble to take people all the way up there to crucify them, much less crucify them way up in the sky on tall crosses. So the idea was to put them on the roadside at that spot. And the same spot is marked X in both photographs. So imagine him just outside the city, just outside the gate, right at the conjunction of those two roads, right where at the place of, notice it says in the Bible, he was not crucified on the place of the skull. He was crucified at the place of the skull. So think about the skull as the backdrop for Jesus' cross. It's behind him. The King's Game was played by Roman soldiers in order to entertain themselves by abusing condemned criminals. And we don't know for sure that Jesus had the King's Game played with him. It doesn't say in Scripture. But what they describe is exactly what's in the King's Game. You land on you roll the dice, you land on a certain square, and then you get to do a specific thing to the prisoner because you landed on that square or that piece of the pie for the board game. You got it? Now, this could be the Antonian fortress where this happened to Jesus, or it could be Herod's palace on the other side of the city. We're not sure. Jesus wasn't whipped, he was scourged. You scourge someone with a Roman flagrum. You can memorize these words if you want to. Impress your friends. Scourging was done with a flagrum. A flagrum is a leather whip with bits of metal or rock or something on the end of them, and it's designed to just shred your flesh. Now, it's not as bad as poor Mel Gibson made it out to be in The Passion, where there were these giant lead or stainless steel razor blade things, hunks that were as big as a baseball, slamming into his back. I don't know what that was, but it wasn't Roman. Don't expect movies to be biblical, not even Mel's. So here's some of the things mentioned in the gospel about Jesus' crucifixion. On the left, all four gospels: Golgotha, soldiers offering wine, the titulus, that's the title or the sign that they put on the cross that said Jesus Christ. The King of the Jews, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And then the two crucified men with him on either side. The soldiers, the women, the final breath, and Joseph of Arimathea putting him in his family's new tomb, which was nearby. Mentioned in the Synoptics, but not in John, or Simon of Cyrene. We're not pronouncing that correctly. Carried the cross for Jesus. He was crucified at 9. In the morning, Jesus was derided by the people there, both passers-by, the scribes, Pharisees, priests, Sadducees. They were all deriding him. And people walking by were shaking their head, wagging their heads. Darkness from noon to 3. He died at 3. The temple the temple's curtain is torn from top to bottom. He says from the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" That's a direct quote from Psalm 22. Read it sometime. "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Today you will be with me in paradise. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit," or breath, or life. "Behold your son, behold your mother." He was speaking to, we presume, John and his mother Mary. He said, "I thirst," and he said, "It is finished." About crucifixion in general, Romans learned the practice from fighting Carthage in the Punic Wars of the 3rd century BC. For the next 500 years, Romans perfected crucifixion until Constantine I abolished it in the 4th century AD. Constantine was the first Christian emperor of the Roman Empire. Crucifixion was usually reserved for male slaves, disgraced soldiers, and seditionists, not citizens or women, although I did read of 1 or 2 records of women in rare circumstances being crucified. It was generally reserved for men. And so here, if you'll notice in these pictures, there's a lot of symbolism, not the least of which is 3 nails for the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, when there were really 4, because we now know that he was nailed through the sides of the cross through his heels into the side of the cross, not the front of the cross with one nail, the sides of the cross with two nails, and we'll get to that in a second. So 4 nails total. But notice Adam's skull is in all this art. It's always in this art from the period. There's Adam's skull. There's Adam's skull. And there's Adam's skull. What's going on with that? Well, the skull is there not to be taken literally, but to be representative of the fact that symbolically or theologically, they were thinking in terms of, well, Jesus's blood cleanses the human race from sin, which begins with Adam's disobedience and fall from grace. So Jesus's blood pouring on the tomb and the skull of Adam releases the human race, is a symbolic, metaphorical way of releasing human. So he's not, Adam's not buried there. It was just, some people may have thought that. They also thought the world was flat, but you know. So the problem with these tall crosses is, and the problem with the position that they're crucified in there on the front of the cross. Notice that the nail goes through the palm of the hands into the front of the cross. One nail goes through the feet into the front of the cross, except for the guy on the right. Way over on the right, it looks like his legs are just tied there. But they're guessing. This is 1,000 years or more later. They're guessing. No remains have been found. They didn't know how they crucified people. But imagine what gravity would do to that guy. What would gravity really do? You can't be in that relaxed position. That's impossible. Try to do it. This is what happens. That's a college student being crucified by Dr. Frederick Thomas Zugebe. He was a forensic guy. He was a medical examiner of Rockland County, New York, for many, many years, and he was trying to figure out the crucifixion position. And he crucified a bunch of college students, which I think is a great idea. I didn't say that. In reality, what happened to the students was the body arches forward dramatically, and you die fast. What's the point of crucifixion, Gene? You die slow. These guys couldn't stand it. They didn't last but 15 minutes. This guy lasted about 20. He's the only one that could take it. I think he was on the cross-country team. Dr. Zugebe used cadavers also and found that only 45 pounds of pressure causes the nail to tear through the flesh of their hands and feet. What he discovered was that you fall off the cross if you crucify somebody like that. You just fall off. The nail tears right through the flesh of your hand is going to tear with your body weight. It's going to come out of your palm. There's nothing to anchor it here, nothing to secure it. It's just going to rip through your flesh. Not pretty, but a fact. So with nails through your palms and the top of your feet, your body weight causes you to fall off the cross. And there's a nail. I believe that if you look over here on the right, I believe that that's the spot, and you can feel it pretty simply. And we'll talk. I'll bring over Gene's model when I turn off the PowerPoint. I think that's the spot. Notice that from the forearm to the wrist to the hand, including the fingers, all of that's the hand. In the Bible, your biblical word for hand is hair, and hair is referring to from here down. From here down, all this. So when it says in Acts 12:17, the guard struck Peter on the side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off Peter's hands. Well, chains don't fall off your hands because you don't chain hands. You chain wrists. But in Greek, that's your hand. The chains fell off his hands. Where were the chains? They were really on a more precise location, his wrists. But wrist and forearm and hand are included in hand when you use hair in Koine Greek. For many decades, this was the only crucified remains found. This is Yehohanan's ossuary. An ossuary is a bone box that's long enough to put your femur in. The femur, or your leg bone, is the longest bone in your body. So the ossuaries are like this. And you put all your bones in there after your body has decayed. After a year, you put the bones in there. And then you scratch the name on the side so you know who's in there. And that reads Yehohanan ben Hagkol, which means Jehohanan, the son of Hagkol. Jehohanan was crucified like that. Now, the ropes we're not sure about. The nails in the wrists, the hand, we're not 100% sure about, because Jehohanan's wrists and hand and forearm did not seem to be bearing any damage, much less a nail. But that is a crucifixion nail going through his heel bone. And that's the outside of his heel bone right there on the left. And they put a washer of wood right here. You can see it down there. They took a little plaque of wood and put it right there to act as a washer to sandwich your heel tight to the cross on the outside, on the left and on the right sides of the cross. This is the way he was crucified. We know for a fact because the heel bone's there. What's interesting about this heel bone, other than the fact there's a crucifixion nail in it, and was unique until recently, that it's hooked. Look at it. Look at it. It's hooked. So apparently when they were driving it in, apparently they hit a knot in wood or something that made it curl and catch in that knot. So when they tried to take the nail out, it wouldn't come. So they yanked him off, and a chunk of the cross came off with him, a chunk of the post. So they tested the wood out here from the cross and could not determine what kind of tree it was. But they tested the wood here where the plaque is, and there was a lot more of that. And they determined that it was olive wood. Most of the trees around Jerusalem today are olive wood trees, olive trees. And again, that yellow plaque of olive wood right there is so he can't pull his leg away from the cross. It's got him secured so he can't pull free. The head of the nail is not sufficient. They wanted to put something in there so that he couldn't pull free. They're guarding him anyway. I don't know what they're worried about. I guess they're worried about some other folks kind of banding together and, trying to get him. Okay, so now we have 2 crucified remains found as of 2021. It's the first time I've taught about it, and I'm not going to say much, but I do want to say that in 1968, look at the first one. North of Jerusalem's Old City, archaeologists found what was for decades the only Roman crucified remains ever found. In his ossuary bone box for 2,000 years, Yehohanan or Jehohanan ben son of Hagkol still had a crucifixion nail piercing the outside of his heel bone. By outside, I don't mean it didn't go through. I mean outside as in the outer part of your foot, as opposed to the inner part of your foot, the outer part. In 2021, only the second crucified remains were discovered in Finstanton, England, near Cambridge, north of London. In 2021, the man's remains included a Roman crucifixion nail still in his heel. There's a picture of it on the right, same spot. Now, let me ask you a question. This is my conclusion. Although the Romans crucified thousands of men for 500 years, only 2 discovered remains are certain, the 2 above, 68 and 2021. That the nails were lodged in the exact same bone, the exact same spot, the heel bones, which is the strongest bone in the foot, proves that this is the way it was done. Imagine 500,000 people being crucified, you find only 2 remains, and there's a crucifixion nail in both heels. This is the way they did it. It's just more proof that it's the way they did it. That's what I was looking for. I'm so glad they found it. So now we've got 2 guys, and their feet, at least we know how their feet were crucified, and that means that that's probably the way it was always done, with rare exceptions when they would crucify them in gruesome positions to scare Jerusalem, for example. They crucified people who tried to escape during the siege of 70 AD. They crucified people in all kinds of bizarre positions to terrorize the inhabitants who were looking out over the wall at the encroaching 10th Legion. All right, so note at the bottom, 2 other possible instances of Roman crucified remains have been claimed in Italy and Egypt. I read a little bit about them. There are holes in these heel bones that resemble the hole of a crucifixion nail that it would make. But no nails were found, so we're not sure. But it's not surprising that there are holes in these 2 heel bones. to give them the time frame and where they were found. Roman Empire. And in the, I'll shorten this, in the movie, The Gospel of John, if you look over here, they must have, God bless them for consulting some scholars, because they did Jesus's heels in the Gospel of John like Jehohanan's, okay? But look, they put his hands on the front of the cross instead of the back, which means he's going to do that lurching forward thing. So he couldn't stay in that position, just like the college students. He couldn't do it. The actor playing Jesus couldn't do it. So they strapped his butt beneath the loincloth with a strap, a belt. They strapped him to the cross so that it, sort of pinned his buttocks against the cross so that he wouldn't lurch forward like that. But it still looks dumb. Who would do that? The idea is to make the person so comfortable that they could suffer for days. You're not going to last long like that. That's not the point of crucifixion. Crucifixion was to torture you to death for as long as possible. Again, on the left, traditional. One big old nail through both feet on the front of the cross. On the right, 2 crucified remains, maybe 4. They all have holes in their heels. 2 of them have nails in their heels. There's your olive wood plaque, there's your cross, and there's the foot between and the heel bone with the nail through it. So memorize these words, if you will. This post on the cross is called the stipes. This crossbeam is called the patibulum. Stipes, patibulum. And they gave you a thing to sit on. This is from Roman records. They give you a thing to sit on called a sedile. It's in Italian and Latin, it means seat. It's how we get the word saddle, Gene. Sedile, saddle, right? No horses around, but so the condemned prisoner was to carry his crossbeam, patibulum, to the same. Imagine if he fell. Now, in the Bible, it doesn't say Jesus fell. We imagine that he fell 3 times because there are traditions around that with the Stations of the Cross, but they're not factual that we know of. What we're told by the Roman records is they carried the crossbeam to the place of execution where there was a post already up, and that the post would have a groove carved into it called a mortise, and the tenon at the top is where the mortise fit to create that. Here's the tenon, here's the sedere, here's the mortise in the patibulum. That fits on the top of this, creates this cross, and you sit them on that, nail their heels to the sides, throw their arms over the top, nail their hands to the back. Now you're comfortable, reasonably speaking. That's Joe Zayas down on the left. You've already met him. He did that faint inscription on the Absalom's tomb that I did the program on. That's the late Vasilios Safaros, another archaeologist I worked with at Corsi. He's also at Capernaum. And he thought that Jehohanan was crucified like that, with his legs swung over to the side and one nail piercing his heels, but the nails weren't long enough to pierce 2 heels. I don't know what he was thinking. But he was sick and getting older, and I don't know, maybe but Joe was worried about him and was telling me, I don't know why he thought that, but clearly not the way they did it. So, quick explanation for the tall cross. Let's go to a Roman bathroom. This is a toilet. These are toilets I'm going to show you. Numerous toilets. We know how they relieved themselves. The archaeologists have found all kinds of explanations in the archaeological remains for how they did this. And there are even signs on the wall, like in one of the cities, the archaeologists found graffiti on the wall. It was a sign painted on the wall, and it said, "Please put the sponge on the stick back in the receptacle." That's what it said. Please put the sponge on the stick back in the receptacle. Hey, Catherine, and hello, Dale. And so what they did was, see the hole in the front of the toilet? You can pass the brush through there while you're sitting here and clean your bottom with it. Rinse as needed in this little trough of running water. And then when you're done, rinse it up here, and then you put it back in the receptacle. Same in all of them. This is an actual original marble. You sit down on that and you rinse the brush down here and you pass the brush through there to clean your bottom, and then you rinse again as needed, and then you put it back in the receptacle. These are shared, this is shared toilet paper.
Hmm.
This is shared toilet paper, okay? Their word for it in Greek is xylospongium, which means stick sponge or sponge on a stick. In Latin, tersorium. You can see you can just pass that sponge right through the front, clean your bottom, pull it back out. It's pretty efficient.
Excuse me.
There's an inscription in the second century, from the second century, in the baths of the seven sages in Ostia, Italy. And it reads, "No one gives you a long lecture for studying this as long as you use the sponge on a stick." Well, what they're saying is, no one wants to talk to you if you stink. It's a joke. They're making fun of one of their pals for not cleaning his bottom well enough. In the middle of the first century, down in the green at the bottom, Seneca reported that a German gladiator committed suicide with a sponge on a stick. He just shoved it down his throat. Xylospongium, it's suicide by xylospongium. Notice that the men in the drawing are holding sponges on sticks, and note the channel of running water for rinsing. Every Roman soldier was issued a xylospongium. It was a part of what they brought with them. You never knew when you were going to be, at a bathroom, and you always needed toilet paper, and you're going to go to the bathroom every day, so you take your own sponge with a stick, right? All the Roman soldiers had them. So there's only one reason I can think of for a super tall cross, and I guess you probably already guessed it. It's absolutely disgusting, but I'm going to share it with no emotion because that's what I promised you I would do. So it says in John's gospel, it says in all the gospels about I think something about the sponge on the stick. No, Luke leaves it out. Matthew, Mark, and John all mention the sponge on the stick. John said that Jesus said he was thirsty, and the descriptions are a little different in Matthew, Mark, and John about what happened with the sponge and a stick. One of them says that someone put some sponge on a stick, like they did it on the spur of the moment, but you have to attach the sponge to the stick at some point, because that's what it's used for. But it's not, everybody I think assumed that because they had to attach the sponge with the sour wine on it or whatever to a stick, was that, oh, well, they put it on a spear or something to get it up to Jesus' face because they crucified people really, really way up high. But that's just not the case. Sponge on the stick is xylospongium. So one of the soldiers had a xylospongium with him, but they probably all did. But one of them took his, you see, and did what you can't believe, and just continued to mock Jesus like they did when they were doing the King's game. They're making him drink from a bathroom utensil. Mm-hmm. So in the Gospels, here's what it's here's the multiple choice. A, it says sponge on a stick. B, it says sponge put on a stick. C, no sponge or stick. D, a sponge put on a branch of hyssop. E, all of the above, and F, none of the above. Which one do you think it is? Matthew says sponge on a stick. Mark says sponge put on a stick. Luke omits sponge and stick. John says sponge on a branch of hyssop. Now there's some theology. Again, John being bold and different. Hyssop is the kind of branch the Israelites used in Egypt to put the lamb's blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death will go over. And is the sponge on the cross the final insult before Jesus dies? I vote for yes. I wondered if anybody else had been doing research on this theory of mine about the sponge on the stick, and I found this paper called "The Sponge Stick: Scatological Undertones to Christ's Humiliation at the Crucifixion," and I downloaded it, and I'm in the footnotes.
Wow.
Hello? That's pretty cool, right?
Who wrote it? Who wrote the article?
A student at a Lutheran college.
Okay.
Student at a Lutheran college. It is true that the Roman soldiers played the king's game with prisoners. It is true in scripture, Jesus' abuse at the hands of Roman soldiers sounds like the king's game. The hypothesis that we're not certain about is, but it's a good hypothesis, is that the Roman soldiers played the king's game with Jesus. They just didn't call it that. They described it well, though. It's similar then with the sponge on a stick. Romans used sea sponges and attached them to a stick, xylospongium, for toilet paper. True also that a soldier soaked a sponge on a stick to give Jesus something to drink during his crucifixion. My hypothesis is that Jesus drank from the xylospongium and that he is crucified at eye level. And that's pretty close to what it looked like. You can see that there is a peg here that he's sitting on. His arms are draped over to the back of the cross. His hands are turned the wrong way, but that's okay. I mean, turn the hands around and nail the back of the wrists, and you are quite comfortable in this position. You're just sitting on the cross. By the way, in the Roman record, one of the judges is written as having said, when he sentenced a criminal, he said, "You shall contemplate your crime on the cross, sitting on the cross of woe." Sitting on the cross of woe. So the way that they would do it, I'm probably running out of time. Yeah, I need to stop. Like that, I gotta stop. And so now we're gonna ask questions, and I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna end this thing, if it will let me. And talk to me, please. I want to hear what you have to say.
Howdy, Dale.
Right, hello to Ann Wright Roberts. Hello to Bill Grubbs, and we're glad y'all are here. And hello to Kathy Chitwood and to Kia. And who else is here earlier? There was somebody else. There's Dale and Patricia, and that's Jean and me, Bert.
We don't have to use those bathrooms, do we, when we're there?
I'll make sure we'll find one for you, okay?
Yes, but when you go deep sea diving, bring us some sponges.
Yeah. I was wondering where they got the sponges.
Well,
Free from the
Bert,
sea,
you know
from
that
the
there are some interesting facilities.
There are some interesting facilities over there, depending. You have to be prepared for the occasional Turkish toilet if you're in Jordan, for example. But have you run into Turkish toilets?
Did you just say it depends?
Gene, I don't know if I'm taking my own toilet paper.
I may have to
Take
pack
my
another
own
bag.
toilet
Take wet wipes. It's worth its weight in gold. Take wet wipes.
I know in Egypt you need to take your own toilet paper.
Can you see the feet are nailed to the outside on Gene's model?
Cool. This is so cool.
And then they're
Gene.
nailed to the back. Can you see the nails? Arms nailed to the back. Yeah, that's pretty close.
How long did it take you to make that, Gene?
A little while.
5 minutes.
No. I'm wearing my cross. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, she's got a cross on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so talk to me. Some of you have heard some of this before. I tried to include as much new stuff as I could. I'm sorry I went so long. That's just such great stuff, and I could talk about it for a long time. So what have you learned? What's new, different? What questions do you have? Let's roll, people. Well, Dale, you go over there, man. You're one of my
What do we
friends.
have?
Oh, I hear Catherine. Okay, Catherine, talk. Sorry.
Why has it been depicted that it's a higher up cross? Where did all that come from?
My hypothesis is that they only do the high cross, the tall cross, because the people 1,000 years ago, or whenever it was that they made the art, they didn't know, but they read They read in the scriptures how he was thirsty and how they wanted to give him something to drink. So compassionate, those soldiers. They went to all the trouble of finding a sponge and a stick, real long stick, and putting the sponge on the end of it and dipping it in some great beverage. And then all the way up into the sky, you have to have a long, that's why the sponge is on the stick, because they couldn't reach his mouth. But that's not true. That's not the way they crucified people. It's clear in the Roman record. It's clear in archaeology. It's clear in the Bible. That's just a mistake. It's probably xylospongium. They were probably still mocking him in his death. And by doing that, and we didn't recognize it because we didn't know xylospongium. And we hadn't even considered it until this century. And since 1968, that's how many years? 55 years? 50, yeah, something like that, 50, at least 55 years. We know about Jehohanan. We know how he was crucified. And still nobody knew it. And nobody knows that the crosses that we see so ubiquitously in movies and art are just absolute guesses. This is not a guess. This is a hypothesis based on evidence. I'll go with that.
Probably nobody will notice some of it but me, but if you even look in the background of all those paintings from the Renaissance or Middle Ages, what you end up seeing is armor and weapons of their period, not the Roman period.
And clothing.
Yeah, the horses don't even look like they would have looked back then.
Yeah.
Architecture doesn't look like it would have looked in Jesus' day.
No.
They painted what they knew and saw and used their imagination like a lot of Hollywood directors do, unfortunately.
I agree.
It's like don't count the number of shots in a movie about the OK Corral.
Yeah, those are the magic guns you don't ever have to reload.
Yeah, and by the way, it didn't happen at the OK Corral. But anyway,
Yeah, there you go.
Same thing.
Same thing.
You ever notice details when you see a movie about people diving that are wrong, Kathy? Like when
Yes,
people- yeah.
absolutely. There's a lot, so many misconceptions.
Uh-huh.
The biggest is their oxygen. We're not diving on oxygen. We're diving on air for the most part.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So it's compressed air in there?
Huh?
Compressed air?
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
most part.
I didn't know that.
A
Well,
little bit of oxygen added to it for safety. That has more to do with not so much nitrogen than it is oxygen, but yeah, usually just air.
I did it once with a friend, and it was fun, but Dale, you were saying, I'm sorry.
You know, when I listen and I agree with your presentation about how the crucifixions were done, but the depiction that we see even today, I think it's because we conceptualize something that we don't really know about, but yet we try to figure it out by hearsay or how this might work or could work. And until we have better knowledge, we use the best that we have, which doesn't always mean it's correct, but it is still the best that we have. And you've got normal church people who, to listen to what you did tonight, would be blown out of the water because it goes against all of the tradition that they have learned, not just in their current life, but the previous 2, 3, or 4 generations has been passed on. And one of the blessings that I find in this study tonight is once you're offered better facts, you can make better decisions about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see. You know, you offer something that's better based on research and scripture that you can actually say, this is different than what's been conceptualized for the last 200-300 years, and even in paintings that we see, because we know that in Constantine's time and others, the view of who Jesus looked like was formed by their personal opinions of it and not actual facts of him being a Mideastern person with probably short hair and olive colored skin and brown eyes. But because it was Constantine and the empire, he ended up being blonde and blue eyed and fair skinned for the lack of knowledge, I think.
Well, and the Renaissance was born in which continent?
It sure wasn't Asia.
Nope.
Well, Dale, throw this at you too. We have an American, most of us on here are from North America at least, sensibility about the idea of cruel and unusual punishment and the compressed timeline that we get in the Gospels because of Jesus's injuries from the night before brought about an early, much more early death than we can imagine. You know, we're talking about days, sometimes weeks. People would stay there and die of exposure.
The longest recorded incident in the Roman record was 7 days. Now, have you ever tried not to sleep for 7 days? Or maybe he just kept passing out and waking up and passing out. I don't know. But he was comfortable enough to live for 7 days. So the cross wasn't lethal to him initially. It was the cumulative effect. Now, they'll tell you that there's this doctor that wrote a paper in the early part of the 20th century where he had it all figured out. You know, Jesus died of suffocation. Well, if the guy was suffocating, how come he stayed up there for 7 days? And the point is, don't suffocate him.
Or the one that made it, you know, he died of a broken heart.
Well,
You know,
thank you, Hallmark. Died of a broken heart.
You know, as much as we can glean from scripture about what happened to Jesus prior to the crucifixion, there's a lot of indication that he was toyed with, played with, and literally beat almost to death before, if we believe in the Via Dolorosa walk, before he started carrying the cross to Golgotha. I mean,
Yeah.
in the Antonia Fortress where he was kept, he was part of the game they played. You know, the Basilenda, the game of the kings. You know, when you read about the cross, I mean, the crown of thorns and the robe and the mocking and the spitting, he was being physically beaten prior to. So that's, to me, that's one of the reasons why, for one thing, his life expired quickly on Good Friday.
Yeah.
Well, maybe from
How hurt would he have had to have been? I wonder. Sometimes I wish I was a doctor. But anyway, how hurt would he have to have been to have spent such a short time on the cross before he died? Because remember, the way I'm describing the cross in the literature and in the studies that I've done, the way I'm describing it, it's not going to kill you. They put you up there so it won't kill you. They put you in that position so it won't kill you. Quick. They kill you slow.
where's the deterrence in that?
the germs could have killed him from that sponge.
I don't know. I mean,
Dysentery.
yeah, and you know, the blood loss, the trauma, the bruising, hypovolemic shock is possible, blood pressure dropping, body temperature dropping, and just going into all kinds of distress. And you know, he may have gone into convulsions. We don't know. We don't know how it happened. We do know his last breath, according to Mark, was a scream. I mean, I'm just giving you information. I'm not trying to milk anything here.
And how did they finish off the two when it was John's gospel to bring it to an end?
Yeah, when they broke their legs in this position, you can see how that your life would be shortened significantly if you break their legs, because you can't push up here and readjust your seat.
Can't lift up to breathe.
You can't lift up. You can't lift up to breathe. You can't lift up to just and try to stay. You know, it's constant motion trying to get the most comfortable position. It would be an agonizing, writhing, long process, and you would just live in your own pain until you're gone.
Can't even imagine. Oh.
I can't either.
How cruel.
Well, Kia, I haven't heard from you, and you were here. You were there this morning. You were at June study.
Lurking.
Lurking Kia. Are you there?
Yeah, just listening to this, I've heard a portion of this before, and just putting things into perspective. Re- for me, in this type of study, learning about the crucifixion, I don't care how we look at how the depiction may be. It's sad, it's deplorable, it's heartbreaking, regardless of which story you hear or which story you're told or you learn, because you have to think about how a human being suffered so greatly, was humiliated so greatly, and these are other people doing this with joy and enthusiasm and excitement, and that truly breaks my heart.
Yeah. I heard one of my friends over in Jerusalem talking about how he imagined that, there were just all kinds of crazy people in the world in that day, just like there today. And if you were in the Roman army and they stuck you at an outpost like Judea, you were probably the worst of the worst. I mean, that's not a high position post. That's I'd rather be anywhere but here post. They didn't like the Jewish people. They didn't want to be there. They felt like they were being punished by being, sent to the, dismal seepage United Methodist Church after 20 years, and you're sending me there. It's
Look out now.
yeah, it's not the place you want to go if you're in the army. I mean, you went to the Air Force base in Germany, and that's great, but golly, imagine being appointed to that desert in the Middle East.
No.
They didn't have AC back then, or heating. Well, our hour is running out, and I wish we had had more time to discuss. I apologize for going so long, but I found some new things I wanted to share, and it took longer than I thought.
I want to say something
Go.
about new things. So I don't remember before the Adam's skull and the paintings. That was new for me today. And I'm curious about who first put it there and why. I mean, I hear the connection that you're making between sin and, Adam, the first man, and the blood from Jesus. I mean, that's powerful, but I'd never seen that or heard that before.
A brief story about what happened around that. It's a personal story. I was in Israel, and they I'm in pain, y'all. Hang on a minute. Let me catch my breath. Maybe I should go. I can't think. I'm uncomfortable.
Okay.
I've been squirming in my seat for 30 minutes.
Okay. So sorry.
It's okay. What were we talking about?
You were going to share a story.
Oh yeah, and it was about.
I was talking about Adam and the skull.
Oh yeah, Constantine Pilatus. Constantine Pilatus is an archaeologist who was doing a monastery from the Byzantine period down near the Dead Sea. He was doing the excavation, and on the wall of the church he found a graffiti, and it showed a skull, and it showed a cross, and it showed some lines, and he was talking about how he thought it might represent this or how it might represent, but it looked to me just like a cross with the blood flowing on the skull of Adam. That's what it looked like to me. So, and that was about 5th or 6th century. So that theme's been around for a long time. And I think some Orthodox and Catholic people may believe that literally Jesus was crucified on top of Golgotha, and the inside of Golgotha is Adam's skull. But most people understand that is a theological metaphor for Jesus' blood cleansing Adam's sin, the original sin. When you walk into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there's a huge mosaic on the wall right in front of you. The skull of Adam is this big on that thing. And it's got crossbones in a skull, just like a pile of bones.
Wow. Have y'all noticed that before?
But I know Dale's probably noticed it. He's been so many times.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember seeing that before.
Well, if you don't stop and somebody points it out, there's so much going on in that building.
Mhm.
That's the thing about that building, y'all. It is not fun for most tourists leave there disappointed. You won't with me, I promise. I know where to take you, I know what to do. I can help you remove that building and see the site. We're going down into the belly of that church. By golly.
You know, by gosh, by God. Okay.
Others, are we done? Sorry, I'm out of gas. I don't know, y'all. Long COVID's trying to slowly kill me. Y'all pray. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it.
Day to day, sir.
Yeah, y'all have a great evening. Anything else from you, Gino? Dale? Kathy?
Mm-mm.
No, thank you so much.
Good to see all of you. God bless you and thanks
Great
again for
job,
this.
Gene.
Good job, Gino.
Praying for you, Bert.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. You guys have
Bye,
a good
everybody.
See you later.